this guy says, I'm Native American from the Quinault Indian Nation, Quinault, Daniel. His name is Daniel. From the Quinault Indian Nation on the Washington State coast. And I was wondering, have you seen our Native American ancestors in heaven?
Oh, yes, I actually have. It says every tongue, tribe, and nation. That would mean the American Indians or other Native Indians to their country. I have seen them, and the Holy Spirit talked to me one time about why some of them wear certain images that people think it was something they thought of. God said, I've always had seers. The Holy Spirit said, the Holy Spirit God, I've always had seers on the earth that would see things and they would duplicate the images that they were wearing, like angels or some of the hosts. They would duplicate what was on their outfits and they would put them on their tents. They would wear them on their clothing. And I think that one symbol, everybody knows it's like this, that has the dot in the middle. I know the enemy would try to steal anything like the Eye of God or the Illuminati people, whoever they are. They always show this big, temple thing with an eye at the top. That image belongs to God. The enemy tries to steal everything.
Interesting.
These Native Americans, I have been in several areas. I've actually spoken for one tribe before, I think in Puyallup. I think it was called Puyallup, Washington State. I've talked to several members of several different tribes of Indians, and there is so much of God and the light of God around those people seeking. And they would say the Spirit of God or the Spirit that came on the wind, and they worshiped not knowing it was him. But at one point, sometimes Christ would just make himself known to them. And there's a lot that are believers out there, and everybody always ties when you hear, well, the name of many, well, they have witch doctors, they have blah, 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 blah. The devil's everywhere, no matter what nation it is or what tribe it is. But some of them are so close to God, they understand the movements of the Spirit before they get born again. So when they're born again, they totally understand that is a real thing, that God is, the Holy Spirit is. And so I have seen powerful. I actually was taken out in the middle of the Arizona desert. You probably heard me say this before. And I met Jolt. And he fights with lightning bolts on behalf of the Western tribes in Western America.
Really?
In West America, he's a regional host of heaven. And he had those symbols like this all over his being, but they were alive. This is heaven. They were alive. They had real living eyes. And every one of these, like a breastplate he was wearing, it was absolutely wild. His eyes were shaped like diamonds, just like that symbol was. He had lightning bolts coming off of his hair. So, if I had time, I'd do art all the time and then let my artist finish it. But it's just fantastic to know there's so much life around you that you're not even aware of.
In our generation, of course, I was a child in the 50s and 60s and onward, but I loved watching cowboys and Indians, but then as we get older, we're talking, there was an implication that all of these Native American costumes were all from the devil, and you're putting a totally different light on it. I don't know if these things reminds you of bamboo, but they got these plates with all these different strips like that. You're saying, I don't know what those are made of or anything. Maybe it's a bone, but you're saying a lot of those were copied from actual angelic beings.
Yes.
That God expected them to model after those angelic beings, I'm guessing.
Yes, because if you've ever seen real totem poles, which they had them near somewhere, if the tribe was well established and it was a pretty big tribe, they would actually have totem poles either at the beginning or opening. Some of them place them different places. So I know if you're hearing me, you're Native American. I probably didn't visit your area, but I have been to a couple and saw some of these totem poles, which are posted usually at the entrance or in the center sometimes. And they have things like faces of eagles, people. One of the living creatures has the head of an eagle, face of an eagle.
True.
They also have different images, but some of them, even back then, I wondered why before I actually met or saw a couple of the living creatures. Their faces are cut with facets, like a gemstone, like how they make facets on it. Well, if you thought of how the totem poles are made, they are cut like this with facets, with angles in them. And I went, that host I met, Jolt, who pretty much ignored me. He was busy fighting the enemy with this lightning staff. But I got a really good, so I sketched him and took him to my artist, and he did him for me. And but even his face was caught, and I went, in my head, I'm thinking, wow, that looks like the face of a totem pole. And then I said, and look at the images he's wearing on his being. What is all this? And the Holy Spirit laughed and he said, we have always had seers on the earth, and they would see this very being out in the desert fighting. They were seers, so they saw them no matter what. And they copied some of the angles in the structure of his face. Even the hair was like, his hair wasn't like soft and weaving, it was like sharp, and had lightning coming off the tips of it. And so the lightning bolt, that eye of God thing, those are symbols that were in heaven that was embellished on this being. And God said that the Native Americans who saw him then copied the way he looked, put it on totem poles, put it on some of their tents or whatever they lived in, what they wore. They began to wear those images. Satan always wants to take credit for everything. Guess what? He does have credit for almost nothing except stealing and copying.
Yeah.